the lecture for today. Let me move this to the side. And I want to talk about some of the topics that we talked about yesterday. I know I covered a lot on going to the Dev Studio and taking a look at how we looked at a portal and how we looked at all the types of skins and the brandings. And someone let me know, someone tell me, can you tell me the order of how the UIs are built? Starting with the portal, and you can either verbalize it or you can put it in the chat. What is the next rule after the portal? Just to make sure that we're all on the same page. Someone let me know. What is the next rule after the portal? You got the portal. It's a user portal. It's a manager portal. CSR portal. That's what they see when it first comes up. And then there's the harness. Okay. Does anyone remember I said briefly the 4 common types of harnesses that Pega has? 4 common types of harnesses that Pega has. I told you one was new. Can you tell me the other 3?
One is
Okay.
perform.
There we go. One is perform, one is review, one is open. Right. Where would I go to find that? What artifact could I go in to find that? If I went into the flow rule, I'll lead you there. If I went into the flow rule, which shape represents the harness? Which shape represents the harness? What color is it? Guessing is allowed. Is it red, green, blue, or psychedelic? Okay. Come on, guys, guess. If I go into the flow rule, you should have your system up and running. And matter of fact, we're still using the same system that we used yesterday. So same system. If I go into the flow rule, which rule represents the harness? Someone said blue. So it's the assignment. Remember we talked about the assignment that had the harness. What is the rule? Yeah, so it's the green. It's the green assignment. This connector that emanates out of the assignment shape. What is that rule? What is the name of that rule? What is the name of that rule? Starts with an F. Oh, that was close. Someone said flow action. It's the flow action rule. It's the flow action rule. On that flow action rule, I have 2 tabs. One tab is for validation, the other tab is for action. In the action tab, what are the 2 types of processing I can do? What are the 2 types of processing? There we go. Pre and post. Remember the functionality of the flow rule, of the flow action rule, is to give you an opportunity in the pre-posting or the pre-processing to update any value that needs to be updated before it displays the section. Once it displays the section, you hit the submit button, then it goes to the validation tab. And if there's a validation rule, it gives you an opportunity to validate. If it passes validation, then when it dismisses the form or the view, then it goes to the post processing of the flow action rule and it executes. Okay. All right. So just wanted to talk about some basics there. Now, oh, when we talked about the portal or the application rule, we said we could do branding. What rule was that called? What was the name of that rule? What was the name of that rule where we could set the colors and the mixins and all of that? What was the name of that rule? We went to the application rule. We saw it there, the skin. So you go to the skin rule, and that's where you can go and set your colors. Now, fairly complex to get into Dev Studio. Go to the portal rule. Go to the application rule. Open that up. You have all those tabs, and then you're going and you're trying to fix something. So there's an easier way to do it, and this is where I wanted to share that with you. There is an easier way to do it. So you come here, and if you want to do some branding, then I can come and I can go to settings and I can go to branding and themes. And this is going to the skin rule for me. I like this way easier. So I can come here and I can say, I want to go and change the logo and the application name. Or I only want to change the application name. Or I only want to change the logo name. But let's go with logo and application. I want to change the logo. I come here, and remember, Pega runs on a server. So this is looking at my local machine. It's going to upload it to the server for me. And I want to go and change my logo. I want to go out and upload it. Let's see, I want to come over here. I see there is a banner. So there's a banner. I'll select that. Now, I'm showing you this because you may want to do this for your project that you're working on. You may not want the standard image that Pega has. You want to have your own logo. You can create your own logo and you can do it that way. So now I go through and I submit it. So now I just updated that. What if I want to change some colors? Well, that's pretty cool, right? So that's very simple. I want to go in and change some colors. So I come to themes in my branding and theme. I want to change the background color just so that you can see that I can do it. And I'll choose something that's not so outlandish, but so you can see that it is different. So I'll choose this color. I'll save it. Come over here. You have to make sure that you do your save. All right. So after save, then I come to preview, and there it is. Isn't that much easier than trying to find the portal, trying to find the application rule, opening the skin, going into the mixing, and trying to look through there to figure out what you need to do? So my expectation would be that at least you would do that you would at least go in and you would change the color. You need to get with your team, decide on what color you want. Try to go in and change the logo. We want your solution to look as customized as possible so that it has your look and feel and what you're actually looking at. Okay. The other component that I'm showing you that you may want to do when you go to channels. Let's see here. User. Let's see. User management. Right. So here I'm going to the user management. I'm going to people. And remember how when we created the new application, you were given the opportunity to add users to the application. So that was a more technical way to do it. That's normally what the LSA would do or someone that's an administrator. But now you can do it from App Studio. So this is a different way that you can do it, and you can do it from App Studio. So you go to people and you see the exact same option where you can go and you can add users to an application, and you can invite people. So again, I'm sharing this with you. It should be part of the presentation, a portion of the presentation. You need to be able to identify someone on the team who's comfortable with the architecture. I'll talk about rule sets and the application rule and everything else with a formal presentation today. But one person on the team should be responsible of talking about the technical architecture, that you guys decided to call it this application because you decided to choose an implementation or a framework because, and you added these types of people because, and then you can get into, let me explain to you how it's set up from a rule set perspective, all the rule sets that are associated with it, and all of the classes that are associated with it. So by the end of the day, through my lecture, through the formal lecture, you should have all of that type of information. Okay. The second person, and I'll put all of this in a document for you, definitely before the presentation, so you guys will have this tomorrow. But the second person should be able to talk about the life cycle, right? The case type life cycle, why you design it with one case type versus three case types, and walk them through that design. Okay, but just cover the life cycle. The third person should be able to talk about the data model. The data model being these are our objects, and going to the data model and being able to look at that and say, you know, this is what's going on with our system. And these data models are used at certain points, certain times, show how they were defined or how they are defined and how they're being referenced going forward. And then the fourth person, because there's four people on the team, then the fourth person should be able to talk about the different UIs, how the UIs were constructed, and are the UIs in the data pages, how that information is being loaded. Okay, so those are the four majors that I'll send you information about. You can start thinking through it as a team, who should be able to do what, and who would be interested in doing that. All right, so the other item that I wanted to cover, we talked about that you could also remember now, you may want to do this as a regular application, or you may want to showcase it as a mobile application. That's something you need to consider, that when you're doing your presentation, you really want to show Public Safety Canada that, you know, if this is a mobile unit, then, or if this is a mobile solution, then you can show them what that actually look like. In the channel, you know that we do have a mobile portal that you could actually use, and you can configure it, and notice that it configures the exact same way. So you may want to test this to see if this is to your liking, and you can then do your presentation with a mobile portal. But if you're comfortable and you don't want to do this, then you can go to the user portal that we've already seen and that we already have. All right. Does anyone have any questions about what we covered? We covered the themes, we covered the branding and the themes that you can go in and do, how you can invite people, the mobile configuration. One of the other items that I want to cover that we briefly talked about, but then I realized in my notes that I didn't show it to you yesterday. We talked about some of the organization and security. So I want to go back to Dev Studio, and I want to show you that there is a management for org and security. And I know we talked about the access group, how you can go to the access group from the operator ID, and you can see the roles. And from the roles, you see the privileges and everything associated with it. But from a administration perspective, I can go here and I can go to, let's see, which one of these? I can go to work and processes. right? And in my working processes, you'll see that for this access group, it gives me a full view of for all the case types, what accesses are given within the roles and what you can and can't do. So that's a really good perspective for an administrator. It's a great perspective for a senior system architect that's working with a team under them for them to see what's going on there. We also have another tool that looks at an access group and then says all of the tools or features that they have available. Out of the box, business architects will have some features, system architect will have some features, but then you can go in through the access group and through the privileges, and you can reduce some of the access, or you can add more tools. So you could come and take a look. Someone's new coming to the team, or your particular team member, they don't have a certain functionality like the clipboard, then you could go in and you could add that functionality. Very, very good tool. And then, of course, the privileges. When I talk about privileges, remember I said it's the most granular of the access and of the security that we can give you in Pega. It is an object-oriented um, security system. So you want to make sure that if I have an access group and that access group has certain rights, I can say that a manager can have more privileges to do more things, or I can restrict what the team can do by going in and creating a privilege. So that's how that works. And we talked about the security policy, and I didn't show you where that is. So in Pega, we go to the security policy and we have the policies for the passwords can be set here. For the capture policies, we can set it here. We have the lockout policies and we have the audit policies. So all in one place, you can go in Pega and an administrator can go in and they can set the org and the security. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to something more pertinent. I now want to talk about the data page, since that's really what you guys will be working on and be focused on. So I want to go back to this particular slide that was in day 2, I believe. And I briefly covered a data page, but we're going to examine it and we're going to dive deep into it so you understand the components of it. And then Ufuk will come in the morning and will tell you how to put it together with your UI, your data page, make it a drop down list, or you want to select a record, things of that nature. So a data page is really used to manage the integration of the data sources. It's our way of separating the business out. So you got that data page as a rule, you got the business sources or the business logic around it, whether it's a decision or whether it's some of the other shapes. But it gives you the capability for it to be neutral in the sense that the way it's receiving data or requesting data, it can request data from many different sources, but it's going to request it the same way in the form. It brings that data back and allows you to have one way to learn to manipulate the data. And so when we look at a data page, what we'll look at is the ability to have what's called the page scope. How long do you want this data to be seen, and how long do you want it to exist? So in a normal situation, when you're looking at data access, you'll take the data access like a query, you'll go to the database, you'll take a trip to the database, you come back from the database, that's one trip, the information is there in memory for a while and then it's gone. But with a data page, we have different ways, whether it's requestor or node, where that we can actually share it. We can go and get the data, bring it back, put it in a shared location, and we can indicate who actually can get access to it. So we have thread that works the normal way. We have the requester that works a little differently, and I'll talk about that when I bring up the data page. But it puts it into shared memory. And then we have the node that also puts it in the shared memory, and that's going to affect your performance and it's going to help you in that sense. All right, so let's actually take a look at a data page. You guys are all working on your data and you're working on your data model. So let's take a look at the data page. Let me close this information here. Let's take, I'm here at customer, and let's look at all three of the data pages just to see how different they are in their purpose. The purpose of the first data page is to bring back a page structure. So the way you interpret that is you want to bring back a single row, or you want to bring back a single object. That's what that represents. A single object or a single row. If I'm looking in memory, I'm calling it an object. If I'm associating it with a table, then I'm calling it a row. And so when I'm wanting to do that, I typically look at the source as a lookup. I need a lookup because I'm needing you to tell me a value or a composite key so I can go and look it up and I can bring that back. And that is indicated by when I run the test, it's going to ask me for a key. So that first data page that's being given to you is a lookup. It is already pre-configured for you for a data dash class to say, I want to look up some information based upon a key. Now you can specify the key based upon the key and then bring that one record back. So that record coming from a database, you should know that that's a row with columns. It's going to come back into my data object with properties. A row with column will come back into the data object with properties. Okay, let's take a look at the list. The list, you see that the structure is different. It doesn't say page, it says list. So that's page and that's list. So a list is a repeating structure that basically says, if I'm looking at an object, I'm looking at a collection of objects. I have a collection of objects that I'm trying to manage. That may mean that what I'm doing is I'm going to take that collection of objects, I'm going to map those to either a control for a drop down or a autocomplete, or I'm going to map it to a table so that I can show you a multiple list of information. That's what a list will give you. Okay. So typically when you're looking at the source for a list, then the easiest one is to use a report definition. Now, there are many others out there that you can do, but again, the easiest one and the most common one, and the one that you should use in this project will be a report definition. A report definition in Pega gives you the capability to generate SQL and to make a call to a database, to a data source, bring that information back into the data page. Now the data page owns that information and it's going to call the database. It's going to bring back multiple rows. So it calls the database, brings back multiple rows. Those multiple rows now when they come into the data object is a collection of data objects. And as I said, and how do you manage that? Now you have to manipulate that with a data transform, and then you send it to the UI. So your standard practice that Ufuk will show you is you have a UI, you have a data page, some parameters are being passed so that whether it's a page or a page list, the parameters being passed will indicate if I'm doing a lookup, here's my key. If I'm doing a list, here's my values for my filter, or if you know SQL, here's my values for my where clause. So now it builds it, sends it to the database. The database brings back either one row or brings back multiple rows, and then you have that into your data page, and now you can use a data transform again to then map it back out. So that's the common process or procedure. So now when you look here, you'll see that on the data page, you have a place where you can accept some parameters. So you have the Parm tab. You'll be able to send some parameters from the UI, from a data transform when you're calling the data page. Now look at the report definition. You'll also be able to see that I can set some parameters that I need to pass on to the report so that when I build the report, then it has those parameters, and you'll see that the report definition has the capabilities to accept parameters so that it can build a where clause, or we call it a filter in Pega. Right, now let's take a look at the savable data page. The savable data page is the data page that you want to use when you want to save data. It saves one row at a time. That's the out of the box feature. And you'll see that it takes a single page structure, just like the first one. These look very, very similar. If you take a look at these, the customer and the savable, they look very similar. You see that the structure is the same, the data source is the same. It's typically always a lookup. The only addition that you see is that when you look at the mode, it says savable. Lookup is the same, but then you see that we have the data save options that come into play. In the data save option, you then have the database feature that you want to do. You want to do a database save. Let me refresh that because I don't want to lose that information. Bring it back. And this is the class. And of course, this class is this data dash class. Then we'll be able to save it into a particular database. Those are the overall common features of a single page. They're typically read only, again, with the lookup, the list, multiple objects, returning, read only, with a report definition. And savable is a single page, a single row of data. It's savable now. And then you have additional with the lookup with additional data save objects. All right, so let's come back, take a look at the list, and let's look at some of the tabs, and then we'll look at some of the fields on some of the tabs. So here we have our definition. And in our definition, we can set the structure. There's either single page of data. That's not one column. That's multiple columns from one given row. And then you have the list. You have to specify the data object. And this should always be data dash. Should always be data dash. Your data pages should always be built off of a data object. The modes can differ depending upon what you're wanting to do. Now, we typically out of the box say that we're going to read it. We're going to request the data. We'll bring that data back. It's in a read-only mode, which means that if it's read-only when it comes back to you, that data can't be updated. So if you want it updated, then you change it to editable. Now I read it, I bring it back, and I can edit and I can modify. So why would some people use one versus the other? Well, for the sake of the data integrity. They want to get the data, they want to bring it back read only. Now it's in the data page space. And let's say that they set it up where it is shareable. They want to be able to share that particular set of data with all the other users. Now, what I can do though, I can have a feature where I would copy that data into another page that someone can edit or that my application can edit. So now I got a single source, but then copies can be made that they could then be that the user could edit if it's mapped back to UIs, and then at some point, if I then want to save that data off, I then can save the data off that's been updated and editable. And then the third mode is savable. Savable basically says if you've ever worked with SQL, I want to capture some data. I need to go to the database. I need to do a insert, or I'm doing an update, and it gives me the capabilities to do that. Now, this is a really big feature. Here's the difference. Here's the difference maker when I look at a data page. I I have the capability to set it as a thread scope, a requestor scope, and a node scope. The best way for me to explain it is to take a scenario. I'm taking the trip to the database to bring back some data. If I set it to thread, then it works like a simple SQL state. You've requested data from me. I'm going to the database. I make one trip to the database. I issue my query. I get my result set, and I bring it back. If the user, and then let's say I map it back to the user looks at it and say, that's not what I wanted. They change the information, or they leave it at the same information, and they hit the enter key again. The exact same thing happens. Goes to the database, and then it maps it back. Okay. If we have 1,000 users, how many trips is that to the database? 1,000 users logs on to your application to fill out your application. They enter in the information, and they need to pull back information about the available universities. And if 1,000 people are on, how many trips is it to the database? And that's not a trick question. Someone like to answer? 1,000. Yeah, yeah. So 1,000 hits to the database. All right, now let's change it up. Let's say that this is a requestor scope. I made it requestor scope. I'm going to use the example of one of the groups that had 3 case types. Now, we know that those 3 case types, they all use the same data model. So they have a data page for their customer information, or for their student information, or for their university information. And so if I set it to requestor, what I'm essentially saying is that the intelligence of Pega will go out and fetch the data, will bring the data back, put it in a shared memory location, so that if I'm at case type 1, 2, or 3, and I'm requesting that same student data, it does not take a trip to the database again and come back. It looks in shared memory, and it uses that information that's in shared memory. Okay, so now let me give you the scenario. I now have 1,000 people. That's a requester. And those 1,000 people ask for the data. This is in the requester mode. And they ask for the data in the first case type. How many trips to the database will it take? This is not a trick question. 1,000 people. It's in requester mode. They're going to the database for the very first time. I need someone to guess. Okay. Well, not quite one. Not quite one. Okay, so the first time, remember I said the first time for this requester, the first time it takes a trip to the database, right? It has to retrieve it back into its shared memory for that particular requester. So in that case, William, it's 1,000. But remember, I have 3 cases that use the exact same data model. So now let's say that case type 2, they need to get the customer information again. For some reason or somehow in the feature, it's an optional action, and you gave them the opportunity to go a second time and get that data. Now the question is that data gotten from shared memory, or does it take a trip to the database? So now here's my question based upon your thinking. If the second time that same requester asks for that data on a different case type, and all 1,000 users do that, how many trips to the database is it going to take the second time? And I'll give you an option. Is it 0 or is it 1,000? You guys have a 50-50 chance. All right. William says 0. Daniel says 0. You guys are right. 0 is the correct answer. And where's the information or where's the data coming from? It's coming from shared memory. Why? Because simply setting this scope to requester, the intelligence of Pega says, I'm going to fetch this data and I'm going to put it in a shared location for the instance associated with the requester. So if that requester requests that same information again from this data page, I've already fetched it one time. So then I'm not going to fetch it again. I'm going to help the performance of my database, and I'm going to get my information from the shared memory. Okay, so you guys can see the pros and cons, right? First time, there is no difference. But the second time, if I got multiple case types using this, then it's just going to fetch from shared memory. You may want to do something like that when you have a table of codes in customer service. People are using them. Everybody that's in customer service use those codes. So when they log on, they're going to have an optional action that's just going to pop up and show you all those codes. Well, if it's thousands of codes that you're using and people are using those throughout the day over and over and over again, you probably do want to set it up as a requester mode to say any one of these case types that get into my system and they use the optional action to pop up to get that information, then if it's a scope of requester, I only have to fetch it one time for this person. And doing it one time now is fairly static. And then it doesn't have to impede the performance of the database. Okay, let's take it one step further. What if I change it to node? Okay, what if I change it to node? Now, let's just say this, that when you set up Pega, from an architectural perspective, it has to be associated with a node, whether it's a virtual node or a physical node, but it knows it, and system administrator sets it up, and someone like UFA and LSA, they have a conversation with the application server administrators and say, hey, we need to set this up. This is node one, this is node two, this is node three, so forth and so on. So now it's set up on a node, but let's say that the 1,000 people, all 1,000 of you are on one node, and you guys are using the same application. So somehow we've looked at your three applications. We decided in MLP3 to merge all three of them. We like the functionality from all of you. We merged all of your functionality into one comprehensive, robust application with 5 different case types that covers everything. All right. So we set it to node. We have 1,000 people log in using one of those 5 case types, and it goes to the database. How many trips are made to the database? 1,000 people log in. I set it to node, and 1,000 people go to the database. How many trips to the database you think it will occur? And I don't care which case type it is. They're requesting the same type of information. They're going through the same data page to get that information. So do you think it's 1 trip or do you think it's 1,000 trip? I'll give you a 50-50 chance. Daniel says 1. All right, you guys are on the right track. All right, so how does node work? The way node works, all of you are on the same node. Now that we know that you're on the same node, the very first person on that node, the very first person that morning goes to the database, and the data page, because it's part of the declarative network, it has a listener built in. It realizes that, hey, this is the first trip. First trip, I'm going to the database. I'm going to fetch the database. I'm going to bring it back into the shared space, but it's the node shared space, not the requester shared space. So now what I'm saying is that the node shared space is available to all requesters, not just to some of the requesters, available to all the requesters. So all of the requesters now have access to it. So now the second person through the 1,000th person, 999 more people, instead of going to the database to bring back the information, now they're going to the shared node memory location to get access to the data. So the question is, which one is more effective? Which one is more efficient? The answer is what? It depends. It depends upon the strategy. It depends upon what you want to do. Yeah. It depends upon the number of users. Absolutely. It depends upon the strategy that you're wanting to use. What if it's important to you? Okay, question. Could I use Node if I'm bringing back information from the stock market? Yes or no? I'm wanting to know what the latest stock price is. Sell. That's right. No. Why? So that's not a good strategy because the application is saying what? I need current and relative information immediately. So using Node on the stock market would not work. So which option would I use if I'm wanting to get information for the stock market to have the daily updates? Which which scope would I use if I want to have work with the stock market? Okay. So Muhammad, if I use requestor, then that's saying only for that particular user. I could probably do that. I could probably do that, except for if I got a million, if I got a million users, they're in my application. I have a million instances. So yeah, I maybe would use requestor. But I would definitely have to let them know that they need to refresh their data, because if they're looking at something to do some research and come back and they hit the button and they see the same information, they're going to see they're going to think that the stock is still at the same price. Okay. So you probably want to use thread. You probably want to use thread in the stock market. People always want information immediately, and then you're actually good. Now, could I use requestor, Muhammad, if I just wanted to know the score of all the soccer games? Requestor may work. Yeah, requestor may work because, you know, how often do they score in soccer? Not as often as the stock market moves. So I probably could use requestor to say, you know, I'm gonna go to there one time, I'm gonna come back, put it in shared memory, and you may only need to refresh it in an hour or 30 minutes or something like that. Okay. So does everyone understand the concept and understand the sheer power of the data page, that it can act in its scope of a thread just like any other query, any other data query? Gets the database, brings back the information, puts it in memory, makes it available to you. But now we have some efficiencies to say requester, that if I have multiple case types for requester and they all will access the same data page, then only will I make a trip the first time. All other times I will use what's ever in shared data for that particular requester. And then I can expand it and make it more comprehensive to say all the users on a node, the very first person will go out and take a trip to the database, bring it back. It's in the node shared space. Now that it is in the node shared space, I make it available to all users on that node. But we do get into an issue, right? We get into an issue about the staleness or the currency of the data. And that's where the second tab comes into play, load management. Load management will give us a refresh strategy. I have a refresh strategy that says I need to reload when it's so many days old, or so many hours old, or so many minutes old, or so many seconds old. Right. So now this really doesn't apply to thread because you send it and it comes back. So this is for requester and this is for node. When I come and I set one of those, it says I will refresh it if I put in 2 hours. I will refresh it after 2 hours. So if I go to the database at 12 noon, when should the first refresh occur? At 2 p.m. Okay. So let me state it this way. It is scheduled or proposed to happen at 2 p.m. But what if no one has requested the data until 3 p.m.? Do you think it'll automatically refresh, or you think it will wait and refresh when someone requests the data? So for efficiency's sake, it's going to say, yes, I can refresh it within after 2 hours, but since no one asked me, I'm just not going to automatically refresh. That would be a waste of a trip. I'm going to wait. Now, at this point, I am available to refresh. The listener is listening. That basically says, okay, based upon the refresh strategy, I'll wait, I'll wait, I'll wait, I'll wait, I'll wait. Now someone comes in following 3 hours later. Now, what I'll do is I won't read from the shared pool. I'll go back to the database and I will bring it and I'll update it. That's how it works. Works for requester node the exact same way. So now you have efficiencies all around where you can actually balance that. You can actually balance it and say, maybe if it's a soccer game and I have the requester node or not requester, if I have requester or node set, if I set it to 30 minutes or 15 minutes, let's say 15 minutes, I set it to 15 minutes, then I feel like I'm fairly safe. That at every 15-minute interval, my data page will be ready to refresh if someone is requesting it. Okay. Doesn't that slow down the first request after the reload time, or is it not noticeable? Yeah, so it's really not noticeable. Okay. All right, so let's look at the security. Now, notice this. You also notice that this comes with some access. You have to make sure that you have the right access group. Not just anyone can do this because you're hitting a data source, you're making a decision, what you're going to do with that data. So this will be set up to where some application will be associated with an access group, and this access group will be able to say, yes, they are authorized to load this data page and to access it. All right, so let's move on to the next tab is the security tab, which says that certain types of rights and privileges can be set if you set up some of the others. And of course, you can pass the parameters in. By the way, the naming convention is if you're going to set up a parameter, or if you're going to reference a parameter, you have to reference it with PARAM dot. So here, if I wanted to make reference to, let's see, where would I do that? Maybe, no, this is actually a data transform. So there's really not a place for me to reference it. But with the parameter, so here, this is what I was looking for. So I could then specify if I put parameters in there, it shows up here, and you'll see that it will format it with PARAM dot first name, PARAM dot last name. So that is the format that is used in all of the rules. When you define a parameter, when you want to make a reference to that parameter, you have to prefix it with PARAM when you're going to some of the other tabs. So almost all rules in Pega, they have a way to receive the parameters for you to define parameters. But if you're going to use or call the parameters, you have to prefix that parameter with PARAM. Okay, so that is my lecture on data pages. I wanted to make sure that I covered that you guys are clear so that when Ufuk starts talking about the data page, you have enough information that you understand how that's being used and how it's being referenced. So let's take a look at the list. Take a look at the list. When I come to the data page list, I do an action. So hopefully you guys are doing this with me so you can really see how it's working. Do an action and I do a run. It should bring up a separate window for you. You always want to flush the instance. So now when I get ready to run it, it executes. It tells me talk a little bit about the clipboard now. Tells me that it's executing on the standard thread in Pega. So Pega application is a multi-threaded application. It's running on a primary page. The primary page is considered the context, the actual object that is running. And then you'll see that it shows you all the information here. It shows you the data object, set the maximum number of records. This looks like a query, right? The query timeout, the row count, start. So it shows that it didn't bring anything back. I don't have anything out there. But if I had something, then it's always in PX results. You always go to PX results to find the information. Oh, there's actually one back. Okay. You always go to PX results to find your information. Okay. If you're familiar with any type of program language, anytime you see the subscript, that means that that is a what? That's a list. So PX result is a data list. It can either take one row back or take multiple rows back. But if only one row comes back, you're going to see it in the subscript. It's referencing this is PX result sub 1. So PX result is a page list type property. It's going to receive back a list of properties, even if it's just one. This is information about my report definition rule that I created and that I sent over. Okay. All right, so let's see here. Where's the key? There's the key. I'm looking for the key. Let's come and look at PX results, birthday, create, update. All right, so this is the key. You know what? I tried to do this the other day and I couldn't do it. See if you guys can make it happen. I select. I actually can't select it here. It would be nice if I could. That's so weird that I can't say. Okay, but if, for instance, I wanted to run this and I want to run customer, I have to come to customer. And as you saw in my action, I would have to do the run for the window to come up, and it's going to ask me for the key. There's the key there. So anytime you see the shaded blue, that gives you an opportunity. If there are values to look up, then they'll show up in the autocomplete for you. I can flush it. I can run it. And it shows me that one record. So that's a page of information that came back. Notice that there is no subscript. It's not part of a subscripted property. This is a page of information. This is a row of data that comes back that gets placed into this particular data object. So let's talk about the moving parts. Everyone comfortable with I have this data page. Now let's talk about the source. I keep talking that it goes to some database, right? It keeps going to some database. If I go to, let's go to list. If I go to list, I say that my data table edit report, I want to open it. So let's go ahead and open it. So this is what a report definition looks like. And I'll talk about the report browser that's being used by managers and users today. But I want you from a developer's perspective to be able to see this is what this is what a report definition looks like. So this is what you guys will be using. You guys will be using a report definition so that you can go to your data table and pull back the data through a query. And of course, this is allow you to have a query tab and you can build a query. Notice the structure. These are the columns. I can add columns. At the bottom, I can add columns. I can delete columns. I can edit filters. So I can create filters. I could say if the create time is equal to, or if it's less than, and if I want to have some type of values, then Pega has created these English-like values that I can look at to say current or previous year, previous month, yesterday, last 7 days, last 30 days. So I'll say submit. So now, if the create date is less than the last 30 days, that's going to create a where clause for me. What is the name of the data class that it's going to reference? It's right here. You write the report definition in the data class. Let me say that again. You write the report definition in the data class. So this data class has this report definition in it, and it gives me the ability to access my information. Now, when you guys go and look at your data classes, you'll also see these first 10 to 15. These are internal system properties or columns that are set up by Pega. So you can't get rid of those. Now, in the report definition, you can, but in your table, you can't get rid of them. But if you didn't want to see any of this in your report, because it's not needed, then you can delete all of these. You probably should leave the key there though, but you can delete all of these, and you can only deal with your data that you're making reference to. Okay. So I'm going to delete this because I just wanted to bring back everything that's out there, because I know that there's not much out there. There's only one. Save it. Action. Run. And it should bring back one row for you. You can make it look like that, or you can make it look like that. Okay. So let's see if I go to the clipboard, see if I can remember its PY report content thing. And I think it's on the standard thread. So I did that fairly quickly. So I'm going to the clipboard. So why don't you go to the clipboard with me? Go to the clipboard and click on that. And it brings up the clipboard. Now, I had mentioned this in the first or second day, but let's quickly cover it again. We have 4 major pages in the clipboard, user pages, data pages, link pages, system pages. Now this makes sense to you. You open system pages, and remember you log in with an operator ID and you log in with an access group and an application rule. All of this gets mapped into memory. It's a lot of information. Wow. So there's your access group, application rule, operator ID. Here, linked, I'll talk, that's not used often. It's more internal linking to properties and other things. But your data pages, now this is shared data that you can actually see. If you set a data page to requestor or to node, you can see the data that's in there. You can come to the data page, expand it, and you can see what data is owned by your data page. Okay. You can do that for the same thing for node. And then of course, what's there for the for the thread. So now you know that when you use a data page, it actually has its own memory management to where thread request or node, so that if it has to save it, it can save it. But now for us, we want to go to the user pages and we want to change the threads. Look at all of these threads that are created in Pega. A lot of threads. I think we go to the standard thread, if I remember correctly. And you should look for a PY report content page. There it is. PY report content page is the property that will save your last executed query. In this case, report definition. PY report content page. And effectively, you're going to see the same thing here that you see gets mapped when you run it and look at it on your data page. But now I'm showing you on the clipboard where you see it. So now if you're running through your application, now you know you can go to the clipboard and you can go to the data pages and you can see information there, or you can go to the standard thread and you want to see the last report that was executed, so you can see what data is being brought back if it's not mapping correctly back to your UI. So PY report content page, I click on that and there's my PX results. I go to PX results and there's that one row of data and I click on it. Looks like the same information. This is the result of my report definition. This is memory within the report definition through the clipboard tool. All right, let's see here. I think that's all I want to show you. Okay. All right. So does anyone have any questions or comments? Since we're here though, let's go ahead and take a look at the report definition. I do have a lecture about the report definition, but I'll tell you this now, so when we get back around to it, it'll be the second time. Here's a query, as I mentioned before. Here's where I can do my filters, creates the where clause. I can generate a chart. In the report viewer, I'll show you how managers and users get access to reports. They get them from the report definition. So a developer will create the report definition, will generate the report, will click on display in a report browser, and now I can say which category I want to drop it in. save it, then I'll go over to the report browser and I'll be able to see it. I'll show that to you when we come back from break. I also can do very complex queries. I can do inner joins, outer joins, multiple joins. All of that can be done here. And you can pass in parameters. And I can generate test cases. So if I need certain reports that I need to run, I can create a test case so that it's part of my scenario testing at a given time. Now I don't have to come back and rebuild those. They are test case rules in Pega. I can call that rule so it can be executed. All right, and let's see. One last thing I want to share with you. I ended up getting out of it since we were talking about the report. So notice that I can summarize, and these are questions that would be on the test. What functions or features are associated with a report definition? I can summarize, I can do aggregations on count, max, and min. I can do sorts, lower, higher sorts, and I can give it a number. I can associate it with a number. If I want this to be low, high, high, low, high, 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1, however I want to do that. So I can do aggregations on count and count distinct. I can do max, I can do min. I can sort from high to low or from low to highest, and I can have a numeric sort order. Follow that by, I can have filters, which will limit the retrieval of my data. And if you know anything about SQL, then it's generating a where clause. All right, that's enough information about report definition and data page. Let's see, is there anything else I need to show? Savable, it's going to save to the database, all of that same. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and take a break. I think we've been talking for a while now, about an hour, hour and a half. Let's just say that it's 1:55, so come back at 10 after the hour, and we will pick up on our lecture to cover the next topic. All right, I will pause the recording. Please have someone remind me to start it. I forgot to start it yesterday, and we talked for an hour before I remembered to turn it back on. Okay, welcome back. Hopefully that 15-minute break gave you a chance to stretch your legs a bit. And let's go ahead and get started. Give me a thumbs up if you're here. I can see a couple of people. Thumbs up. All right. Very good. Very good. Okay, let's go ahead. Start on the next subject. Is work entities in Pega. So what is a work entity? What is work? But we want to understand the platform collaborators. Who are we working with? What are we building an application? Or who are we building an application for? Understand reporting. You've seen a little bit about the reporting. I'll talk a little bit more about it. In Pega, we have a platform that not only supports object-oriented software design and methodologies, but it also supports the ability to mimic organizational structure in teams, because its built-in capabilities is the ability to route work, human activity, to different people based upon the role that they play. And so we look at this optimization of casework so that we can minimize our effort, maximize our results, and also have some reporting capabilities associated with the case data for that work object. We'll look at defining platform collaborators, who they are, how if we support them, those work entities through routing, this concept of moving the accessibility of work from one person to the other based upon their persona, based upon their role, and then providing a platform to report on that. That's a built-in capability that we can see the number of work instances on someone's work list. You'll hear me use that term. And we can even run reports to say how long they stayed in someone's work list, the work basket, or the SLA that's associated with them. We have an organizational chart in Pega that allows us to mimic the organizational structure from a perspective of routing and being able to understand the reporting structure of any organization, so that when the application is being built, it is inherent in the technology, the capability to route from one entity to another. We call those entities users. Users have the capability to be known as operators, and we know that operators have access group. Access groups have application rules, and on that access group, they're given a certain role in which they have capabilities, or that's what their capabilities are defined. I mentioned that everything that a person can do is based upon the sum of the roles, indicates the access to the application. And so the access group manages that for users. We've looked at that several times, how to go to a user, how to go to operator ID, how to go to the access group, how to go to the application rule. Access group, how we look at the roles, the different roles that apply. We open a role and we saw yesterday all the privileges that are associated with that. So now we get the routing. We do all of that. We do the organizational chart. We set up the users with security. So at the end of the day, they can participate in what we call routing in Pega, routing. It's the ability to give that assignment to the right user at the right time. And it could be that I'm giving the assignment to multiple people in parallel at the same time. Pega has the capability to do that. We have two types of routing. Very simple. We have a work list and we have what's called a work queue. It used to be called a work basket. So you hear people that's been around Pega for a long time, they'll still call it a work basket in a work list. A work list has always been considered a work list. So think of a work list. You wake up every day in your mind, you get ready to go to work, and you think of a list of things or tasks that you have to do. Human tasks that have to be performed. That would be your work list. So you are actually doing that. We have another concept. Let's say that you work on a team and the team has a list of activities to do. And so that's considered a work queue. When there's a team and they have a list of work to do, and it doesn't come directly to them, but it goes to the team, and then they have to go and pull a work item off of the work queue. So you'll see and hear that term, pull and push. So pull is always going to a work queue, and we're going to pull a work item off and push it on to our work list. Pull and push. So we'll see those concepts. So let's first start with the organization. I want to walk you through the configuration parameters and the configurational rules that you see in Dev Studio, and show you how something is initially set up in Pega when you're going to build an application. So in App Studio, I want to show you the organizational chart or the organization. And I got there by going to, where did I go? Yes, I went to users. And from users, I go to organization. And then these are my organizations. Now, these are rules. These are org rules that are actually set up. If you go to the Dev Studio, go under organization, you'll see that there are org rules that are actually set up. Unit. Remember, you guys set up division. You probably didn't do a unit, but division. And this is the org level. And if you had an implementation, there would be an implementation also. This is 3 that are set up here. So these are org records, and you can't do any routing if you don't have any org records set up. Users can't get access to anything unless they are associated with an organization. So that's step number 1, that there has to be an organization set up. So let's go to my Dev Studio, and let's take a look at the org chart. It's a bit more comprehensive. So we go to org and security. We were there before. And go to organization. You see operators organizational chart. And you can click on the organizational charts. Organizational charts, these are set up every time you go and create a new application. They want to know what's your top organization, what's the name of that, and it's set up. So we've been working in this tourist, and you see here's the division and unit. You see many more than what you saw in the App Studio, but these are all of the organization that we have applications on. And then these are the operators. So this is a holistic view. This is a overall administrative view of all the operators in the system, what their job title and position is. That's important because you'll see when we go to look at a particular operator, you'll see that they have to be associated not only with a title, but they have to have a manager so we can build a reporting structure. We use that reporting structure when we do the approval. Remember the cascading approval that we do? We use that structure in that sense. All right, so let's actually go to and take a look at, let's see here. Let's go to the operator and click on the operator. Okay, so now we got the organizational structure created. We know that that's in place. We have this operator. This operator has this access group. Access group has roles. Roles are associated with privileges. So I have everything I need to tell me what I can do on this application. Now that that's in place, I have this work tab, which indicates this is my organization. This is where I sit in the organization. And this is my team. So now this is called a work group. They changed the name to a team or a work group, but a team gives me the capability to go across to other organizations in the sense they're not my direct reports, but I can be a part of cross organizational departments. I can build a team. And so that team has to have a manager. Again, this used to be called a work group, but that team has to have a manager, and that manager can manage everybody on the team. They don't have to be underneath an org structure. They can be across the organization. So that's how we handle going horizontal across an org structure. You see, this will give me an idea of how I should indicate who I report to. So as operators are added, as users are added, they have to indicate who they are, what their position is, and who their manager is. All of that set up and it's built for you. Which means what? Now I have an inherent reporting structure in place. And that's really cool because with that inherent reporting structure that's in place, I now have the capability to route to this person because I know where they are in the organizational chart. And if you're building an application for someone in your company, makes it really easy. If you're a consultant and you're building it for someone, you have to go and have a conversation with HR to understand their organizational structure, so you can then work with your administrative team to set up the appropriate relationships. In this work tab, you also have the capability to set up skills. We have something that's called skill-based routing. You ever been on a call with someone and you are speaking French and they can only speak English? Well, let's say that you had submitted a problem to a queue, to a basket, and it went there, but it didn't have enough information on it. The person who calls you back, they're speaking in English and you're speaking in French. Well, one way to solve that is I could say skill, and I could specify French, and I could give it like, well, I can speak French, I can give it like a 7, and then everyone on my team can rate their French skills. And so now that person calls in and speaking in French, and based upon your skill, then what we can do in Pega, we can evaluate the skill of the team, and maybe only one person on the team speaks French, and that person would automatically be able to get the information routed to them or get the work routed to them. So that's called skill-based routing. Skill-based routing is what you can do. And of course, you can have multiple skills. If you locate your cursor there, hit your down arrow, you see there are some default skills that you can put there. You can create your own skills also. And then a work queue. Now notice this person is associated with a team. It can be, he or she can be associated with multiple teams. Indicates the reporting structure, any skills that are assessed, and then the work queue. You then have a work queue that say, my particular team that's part of my work structure, organizational structure that I am under, my reporting structure, we have our own work queue. And that work queue indicates that everyone on my team, we're working on that work queue, so that if work needs to be routed, it can be routed to the queue, and then I can come and pull from it. And I have these options at the bottom that I can get from the work queue first, which may indicate that if something goes to the queue, it's very important, we need to pull from that first. If not, you leave that unchecked, and on your work list, you'll see that only work list items that are sent directly to you are then being seen. But you could go to the queue, pull it, then you pull it over to your work list. So that's the way that process works. Okay. And we have some other options here. I can use all work queues assigned to user team, or I can merge work queues. So those are options. So that particular work tab brings together the organizational component, and it also brings together the operator ID with the access group. Now it says you have the capability to do routing and to make that work, okay? So let's actually go to routing. And let's talk about these entities. When I talk about work, I am saying the work to be done, which is indicated here on my case type. Let's come back to here. Get back to the right place. Go to a case type. Remember in day one, I talked about the business transaction. There's several names for the business transaction. It's a model, a blueprint, a class, a case type, work. And we get that term work from the work dash class. Is the work to be done. So this is the work to be done. Anytime you run this and you see the green assignment shapes, these are UI assignment shapes, human steps, collect information steps, whatever you want to call these, then you have the capacity and you have the capability to do routing. Okay, so you have 4 different options when it comes to routing. The first one is you can route it to the current user. So if I log into the application, it just makes sense. I logged into it. You don't want it to immediately go off to someone else. It stays right there. The UI comes up. You can then enter the information. So let's say that I then said, well, after this person is logged in and they've created a new user and they selected a vehicle and they reserved the vehicle, now what I may want to do is create a collect information and ask them some questions, but they're actually through. I want to send it to a particular person. So the way this flow works, as I'm going from this stage to here, the current user is seeing everything. As soon as it hits this screen, it goes to another person because I've changed the routing. So this would no longer be seen on the current person's work list. This shows up on another person's work list. And remember, we're talking about that whole concept about a service level agreement, SLA. As soon as I'm in the flow and I hit this step, it's moved into that other person's work list. And if there's an SLA on it, now the milestones, goal, deadline, past deadline, those things start up. So I can specify a user, should find my list of users there. I want to route it to that person. I don't want to do that though. I can specify a work queue, and that's going to give me an option of which work queue. I want to send it to my manager's work queue. So now what this is saying is all of the assignments in the first stage and in the second stage and the first process will be managed by the current user and then the reserved vehicle. When I get to another person, it gets routed over to a manager. So it's no longer in my work queue. It's moved on to the manager. Okay. Many times, I'll delete this, when you come to the approval, many times in the approval, well, let me refresh my screen. I'm getting some repaint issues. Give me just a second. All right, so exactly still not painting. Let me do this. Let me go out and come back in so you can see. Just start the video back up. Okay, conscious of that now. All right, let me go back to App Studio, get back into it. I still didn't paint it right. I don't know what's happening. Okay, so I can come here, and this is actually saying that I want to go to a particular user. So instead of the current user, I got the approval from a particular user, and then it goes back to the current user. How does routing really work? If you think about it, when I create this work item, this work item ends up going into memory, right? I can use the clipboard tool. I can see it. I can see the case data that's on PY work page. Remember we talked about that? It's on PY work page, it's case data. Then all of a sudden when I run it, it's actually stored into a database table. So it's stored in the database table. The flow information is stored also. It actually knows, Pega remembers if it finished the first where it is, because there's a token associated with an assignment. I have this table row and someone is requesting it. That means that they have the token, they have a private access to it, which means they can go and read that row and load it into memory. They can do something and then it gets passed on. And then when it gets to this point, it's probably written back into the database table. And this person has to then have its UI, which has the token to say, I can go and open that database table so that I can view it. So there's this routing type of internal token that gets passed around that has access to who can see it based upon where you are in the flow. And guess what? If I have parallel processing, then I do have, in essence, two tokens out there where both can be looking at it at the same time. But like any other database strategy, only one person can update it at any given time. And you got to figure that out when we look at the case locking. Remember we did settings and we went to case locking and we set up a strategy there. That's where we make a determination if I'm doing parallel processing, how I would want to handle that. All right, so let's actually take a look at this. Let's actually run a case. Let me go to the portal so that you guys can see a work list. Here's a work list. 6 items on my work list. These are some items that I've created. So every time I run this application or you run your application, that sits on your work list. You created it. It's for you to complete your task. And as soon as you complete your task from one assignment to the next assignment, then when it goes to someone else, then you would see it leave your work list. And then if that person approved it, then it may come back to your work list. Here are some work lists. So let's go ahead and run again. So I have 6. Come over to my portal. And reservations, I can run it. I can enter in information. Okay, so hopefully you're following along with me. I reset my system because remember yesterday I was having some problems with it. So I reset my system. So it should definitely match what you have if you hadn't done anything. Takes me to the approval. All right, so I'm finished with that. I want to go back to home and notice that I have 7 items on my work list. Okay. All right, so these are items on my work list, and I then want to be able to report off of that. Because I've talked about the work groups, and I've talked about the work group managers, and I've talked about the routing, how I can do push routing, pull routing, and here's an excellent example. We saw how I could set it up for a current user, a particular user, a work queue, or I can use some type of business logic to make that happen. But here you can see that this concept of push and pull, work queue, work list. So case processing context, case gets routed to a work list. It says or a work queue. But in most cases, what we say in Pega, it's actually being pushed to the queue. We can say it's pushed to the list also. But when we talk about pull, it's only being pulled from the queue. So it's okay to use the term, it got pushed to my work list or it got pushed to the queue. But the other concept of pull is that I pull it from the work queue. Now notice that we do have some out of the box routing features to where our rules that we have. These are skill-based routing rules to where it's a two-skilled group, two-skilled work basket. Organizational base, which means that this is across the organization. Some common ones, if I want to assign to an operator, create an operator, send it to a particular work list. And a lot of that's done through the studio, through the portal, where you can go to your work list and you can set all that up, or go to the assignment, and when you're in your design or your development, you can specify what actually should be there. Okay. So that's our routing. So how does routing come into play with the reports? Well, what I can do with the reports, since my work is associated with a work table, and that's what I'm getting ready to show you, my work is associated with a work table, then it gives me the capabilities to look at my work that's out there. And so I showed you where I had those 6 or 7 work items on my list, then they actually go to a table. All right, so before I get into the reporting, let me just show you what that looks like so that you can see the relationship. Let's go to Dev Studio. All right. And let's go to the App Explorer. Let's look at it this way. Now, I know that I'm running the rental reserve case type. So that's the class, or that's the work, or that's the business transaction that I have. And if I right click, or if I actually select that, this will show me all of my work items that are in flight. But I can also right click, if I can get it to work, come on, and you can click on definition, go to definition with me. And we have something in Pega called the class group, which simply is saying this class is grouped so that it can go to a certain table. And you'll see the test condition down at the bottom. So here's the Pega magic. Every time you create a case type in Pega, it's going to create a class that's going to represent the technical implementation of that case type. And it's going to create a database table for all of your case data for that case type that generates it. It can write it into that particular table. Now I can do reporting. Now we get to the point to, well, how do I use that? I can do reporting with the report definition to go and examine my information that's in my database, which is my case data. But not only that, not only do I have case data, I have system data also. I have data that tells me who it was routed to. I have auditing data. I have data that tells me where it is in the flow along with that data. So now I can write a report definition that looks at my case data and that looks at my system data, and I can do some analysis. That's the power of the reporting in Pega, and it's all integrated for you. And so if you click on the test connection, in the test connection, you'll see that Pega has established this class, work class, for its case data to be mapped to this table. And we have a report structure that is automatically generated for you so that I can pull that information. Now, this data is different than the data dash information. Remember, you have the data dash customer. This is not data dash information. That's what we call a system of record. That's a data source. That is either for your application to utilize or for you to write a permanent record to it. And so you may realize that there's two sets of data that's being created or written when it comes to the case data. It is case data that Pega will store in its own application, but it's also from a production perspective, you then would have to write it to those external tables also. Pega keeps a copy. And we have people that are in two different camps that they say that from database integrity, there should only be one copy of data. And there are others who say, well, that's Pega's data. I don't care what they do. You always have to write to our own system of record. But for a developer, for what we're doing, it makes it easy for us because we're just going to use the data from Pega. And there are many huge companies that will do that, to say, no, what Pega saves, it is a database table and it follows the rules of relational database, and therefore we will utilize their data as the system of record. Okay, so here's the table. So let's make sure we understand the architecture. If you go to configure, you go to data model, and you go to database class mapping. All right, so, okay, I just had problems with my camera. Can you guys still hear me? Someone give me thumbs up or, yeah, thumbs up. Okay, all right, well then I am not going to, let me see if I can change it one time. Normally when it comes up, I have to get out and get back in, and that takes too much time. Give me 1 minute to try to fix it. If not, I'm not going to even mess with it. You know what? Let's see if I can get it with this camera. Can you guys see me with this camera? Okay, no. All right, thumbs down. All right, this is my last attempt. If not, I'll just go off camera until we take another break. Okay. All right. So just as long as you guys can hear me, you're fine. So give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. It's good. Okay. And then for those of you who have your camera on, I can see you also. All right. So here I get to the database. I get to the database class mapping, and here's my table. Now this table is associated with other classes too. This just happens to be the parent class, but this is another class that we say that's in the class group. So I grouped all of these classes so they would be mapped to one table. I didn't think it was going to be that many rows anyway. Didn't make sense to create a table for each one of the classes. So the parent created a class and said the children can use the same class. That's essentially how that's working. But now notice something. It tells me how many rows are there. This is not data rows from data dash class. These are the 8 instances that have been executed. They're in some type of state. So what I'm trying to explain to you, that's so that you can clearly understand the architecture, that case type has a class implementation. That class implementation is tied to a database, so that when you're creating your data model and you put those fields a onto a view, and then you capture that captured data gets stored in this database table. And we can use our report definition then to go against this table to then go and pull that information and to examine it. And my data is there with system data, so that it gives me the capability to do really good analysis to say, why is it taking so long for this case or for this group of cases to go through the system, or tell me where they are in flight, who did it, and what type of data is associated with it. Pega becomes an excellent resource for that. Let's take a look at these columns. We know that this keeps up with the number of instances of my case type that I've executed, but it also shows all the columns that are in the database, so that when I do reporting, I know which columns that I have access to. So if you go and click on the number, now yours probably says 90, 92, or 93. I don't know if it says 96, but I went and added some columns. And if you open it up, it's a little small to see, but you can see these are columns in a database table because it has varchar and numeric and all the others. But if you scroll down to the bottom for me, this is the important information. Okay. Every work table in Pega will have a key, PZ-INT key. And I'll tell you that's important because that's a skill that when you really start writing reports and you need to pull data, and even if you're using a data page and you need to pull data, if you don't have any other key or composite key, then you can always default to use PZ-INT key. PZ-INT key will get you back a unique row. And you have this PZPV stream, which is a blob, a binary large object. Now, here's the secret behind the blob. Anything that's a binary large object, it is very fast to read from a database, put it into memory, and to update and write it back to the database. And so all of the case data, so in other words, on your data model, when you're creating your data model and you go to your work class properties, all the work class properties that you map to a UI, all of that information is marshaled and stored into the blob. It is not stored as a column in that database table because Pega would not know how many columns to make. So all of your case data is written and stored into the blob, and the blob is very efficient when it comes to add, updates, delete, so for processing. But now we have a problem when I'm doing reporting and I have 1,000 or I have 1,000,000 rows, and I need to pull out one of the values that's in the blob. Now it's a sequential search throughout there to find that information, and it's going to degrade my performance. What do? There's a way that I can tell Pega that I need to create a column for one of those fields that's in the blob so that I can execute efficient queries on it. And that's called optimize for reporting. I'll show you how I do that. But you can see that these two fields, and I happen to know if it's beyond PZPV stream, then these columns have been added so that I then can do queries against these fields, and it doesn't degrade my performance. All right. So that's the details about a table of Pega that stores the work data. The work data is stored based upon what you have on your data model that's associated with your work properties, not your data dash class properties, but your work properties. Okay. So anything you see on your UI, you can guarantee if it's information that's captured, it's going to be stored into the blob PZ stream. All right, so that takes us back to there. So let's just see how this works. So this is here we have 8 rows. Let's come back and run it. I'll just so that I stay in Dev Studio instead of going to App Studio. So let's come up to our case types. Let's just run it again. Then we'll go back to that table to see if it then added it. So log in. And all I have to do is run it one time or go to the one screen, because once it creates that PYID, it creates that instance object for me, then that's information that Pega has already collected, and it's in memory, so it's getting ready to write it to the database, and it makes up its own mind when it's going to write it to the database. Okay, so there's an R1006. It's created. All right, so now let's go back to this table. I had 8. If I refresh it, it should say 9. There we go. And the same process happens for production environment. Anytime an instance of a case type is executed, all the data associated with it is captured in a table stored in PZ stream, which is the blob. Now you see this in many different forms. If I go to my portal, if I go to my portal, I'll then see all of those work items. Now here in the data, where is it? Tools, yeah. So here in my Dev Studio, since I don't really have a portal that comes up for me, it just runs it, I can go and look at my work and look at my work list of work that was entered by me. And now you see all of my work that's on my work list. So of course I can go to the portal, I can run it from App Studio, I can see all of the items on my work list, but now in Dev Studio, I showed you where I can come and see all of the items that I've created. This was the latest that I created. This is the status. Okay. Let's go to the App Studio. Let's go to the App Studio. In the App Studio, I'm sorry, not the App Studio, the App Explorer. Go to the App Explorer and go to the reports section. Now, you guys have not created these reports. Pega automatically generates a report for you when you create a case type. And when you run your first, case instance, then it will create the report definitions for you. Creates 3 different report definitions. One will allow you to create a summary report. So we have 2 types of reports in Pega. We have a summary report. Off of a summary report, you can do charting. Summary report, you can do charting. And then you have a more detailed report, to where in your detailed report, now you can have detailed lines of information. All right. Let's just go ahead and click here. You've seen something like this before. but you saw it off of your data class. Now, this is off of the work class. This is a report definition off of the work class and gives you the same features. Create a chart. Here's the report viewer, data access that I can do. Okay, but let's come back to the query. Let's go to action and let's do run. And you see it should bring back all of your instances for you. All your instances that you have executed. Whether they're complete or not, they're out there in that database. They're in flight. And if this was a real life scenario, these, if they were routed to someone else, you would not see them here. Well, yeah, you would see them if you ran the report, but you would not see them on your work list. Let's make sure we make the difference. Your work list are all instances that you have work to do on. Once you finish with the work, then they don't show up on your work list, but they're still in the database. Someone else has access to them until it's resolved complete or some way it's actually resolved. Okay, so that then gives you access to the report. So now let's take a look, because I wanted to show you how reports are actually created in Pega. They're created by the report definition rule. Created by the report definition rule. And then we're going to go to the report browser, and then it'll be time for us to take another break. But before I do that, let's just come to this report. And let's go ahead and let's add a column here. Now, I'm fairly familiar with this environment, I think. And let's just add a column called rental customer dot first name. Okay, and when I tab out, now, if it's found, when I tab out, it'll actually pull the column name for me. But some of you may be asking the question, then why is it, usually I can do this and I can hit dot and it gives me a list, but it's not giving me a list. You guys know why? Because it's in the blob. If it's in the blob, it's not a table row and it can't see it. But the system is smart enough to know that this property is associated with that table, and that is a valid property name for a column in that table. So yes, you can use first name. But now watch what happens here when I hit save, or what should happen. Gives me an error. You should get the same error. Why do you get that error? Well, if you go and open it up, remember what I was telling you? It says this property is not optimized. This rental customer first name may result in poor performance because it's in the blob, it's not a column. So basically what Pega has to do, it's like a two-step process. I run the query, but then I have to go over here in the blob, and I have to search through the blob to find this particular value for this particular record, and then I got to bring it back. Well, what if I got to do that 1,000 times? You get this warning. This is one of our guardrails. Remember we talked about guardrails? This is one of our guardrails to say, hey, that's going to be an alert. I'm going to tell you, you need to fix that. But it will still run. So let's go ahead and save it and run it, just to show you that it will run. it runs, and you get all the information there. Okay. All right. So how do we fix that? You know what? Let's change it because I don't want to make first name. That's a text, and that's not a real. That's not a good one to really use. Let's use one called reservation pick up date. Reservation pick up date. Tab out, shows up, so I definitely know that it's there. How did I know which ones to use? Because I just come here and I can see them. Reservation pickup date. Okay. Now I need you to come over to property, come over to pickup date. I want you to right click and you'll see that there is a feature that says optimize for reporting. What did I say that was for? That's a feature that will allow me to run a process, go against the table, and alter the table. This is using DBA terminology. Use the alter statement to alter the table. You can only alter a table by adding to the end of it. I want to add a column called pickup date so that I can get past the guardrail so that you can use an actual query in the column name to pull the information that I need or to report on the information that I need. So I click on that and you get a property optimization screen. And it even tells you for this particular class, I'm going against this table. And it also populates it with whatever data that needs to be populated. And I say next. And I say next. Now don't say finish. You want to see it work. So you want to come over here and you want to look at the population job board. It runs a background property or a background batch program. And you can hit the refresh, see it. It's not moving yet. I can see it here. Now you guys can see where I actually had done two earlier. See, this is still new. Once yours says complete, boy, mine is stuck here. Why is it? Let me do a refresh up here. See, oh, okay. Now, so I had to do the refresh here. My refresh over to the left wasn't working. Now it says that I did a refresh. That means that this should now be a row. Well, let's go back to here. Let's go back to my report definition. Come back to my report definition. Now let's save it again. The red should go away because this is a property with a column in the table now. Voila. All right, let's just go and investigate that so that we know that that's out there. Well, how can we do that? When I go back to, I come back to my database class mapping tab. And if you watch this, the column should increase by 1. It's at 96. It should go to 97 because I added an additional column. Hit refresh. There it is. I can go in and take a look at it. Scroll down to the bottom and there is pickup date. It calls it pickup date _1. So that gives you a fairly good understanding about the reporting structure of Pega and the use of the blob that we use and how to optimize something for reporting. And rule of thumb, Pega says you should not optimize for reporting more than 40 properties per class. The other point that you may notice is the system properties have already been optimized. That's why they show up in your little drop down. All of these system properties are already all optimized. So you never have to optimize system properties. PX, PY, PZ, they're already optimized. Just these that are here, I've optimized 3 of them. You optimize 1. All right, so you do all of that with the report definition. And I told you about the column summarize. You can use for aggregation, sort, highest, lowest, sort order. Down here you have the filters where you build your where clause. You can add additional columns. You can come over to report. Now, you know what? This button would allow us to put it into this report, but I don't want to do it yet. I want to go to the report, show you that it's not there, and then come back over and save it and show you how we build reports so that users and managers can get access to them. All right, so let's go to our App Studio. I can only do this in App Studio. Go look at my reports. So they've already built portal for me, or they built a page off of my portal, and you see these are my reports. Now I have my colors there because the branding that I put on it. So yours probably don't have that if you didn't set your branding. So what can I do in the report browser? This report browser, it's for users and managers, not for developers, for users and for managers. The report browser. First of all, I have reports and I have a list of categories. Let me go back to here. I have a list of categories. The concept is I create categories. From the categories, I can move or I can create different reports for myself, for my users, if I'm a manager. My action, I can manage categories. Click on manage category. You'll see that you have 2 types of categories, private and public. Okay, in public. So if I want to create a new category, really simple. Right. I can make it public, I can make it private. I'll make it private just so it's easier to find. Now you see that it's there. Okay. I can go back. I actually can generate a report from here, but it's for managers and is for users. It is a bit limited. I'll show you, but I do want to show you this is a good concept to where you see the types of report we have in Pega. We have a list report. That's that detail report I was telling you about. So it lists all the detail. And then you have a summary or a chart. In order to get charting, it must be a summary. So you cannot take a list and make a chart. You got to convert the list to summary, and then you can make it a chart. So it's summary or chart, or you have the list, right? And you can do that, and you can go through the process, and it'll give you this data explorer that you can drag and drop, and you can create them fairly quickly. But in most cases, it's much more productive when you got your developers building your report definitions initially, and then they can come in and do some modification. So let's come back here. Come back to reports. Click on this again to see all the reports. And if you evaluate it here, you can see there's this is a chart, this is a list, this is a summary. Now, if you go and open one of these and run them, that's like, for instance, lapse time. Unfortunately, we don't have any real data in there, so it's not going to really show anything. But you'll see that some of the filtered capabilities, they were looking for not resolved, if there's a change in status, and they wanted you to print out the status name and then the case type. So that's what would show up there. So once these reports are generated, then they can be used by users, managers. They can be passed in between them. Users typically can't make reports. Managers have to make all their reports. Some people say that's a real deficiency, but that's the way it's always been in Pega. Okay, so let's just go and look in. Let's come back to this report. Click on this report. This will be the last thing that we do. Well, one of the last things. We have one more topic to talk about, which are insights. All right, so let's take a look at case matrix. So mine shows only 2 reports. How many reports show up in yours? Someone give me a thumbs up if you got 2. Or do you have any? Okay. All right. So I think that's really the default. The default is 2. All right. So I'm going to clear this. Let's go back to Dev Studio, show you how they work hand in hand. Remember, that's the browser tool for users and managers. I keep saying that over and over again because those are testable questions. It's the browser tool for users and managers. In Dev Studio, we have the report definition rule that we write. So we're going to take this report definition and we're going to save it and display it into the case matrix. But I can't because it's PY. The name PY, I can't use that. So I actually have to do a save as. Do a save as, and as long as you change the name, I can just say for example rental reservation. Bring it there. Now I'm going to create it. Okay. Made an exact copy. You go to the report viewer and you click on display and report viewer, and now you save it. It should show up in the case matrix. And you can come here and you can see the report that you have copied. And here's my report. So that's my report. That's the rule name, but the actual name of the report is item details that shows up now in the report browser in the case matrix category. So let's go over to that. Change over to App Studio. In the App Studio, click on All Reports to reset yourself. Come to the All Reports, click on it, go to Case Matrix, and see if it shows up. I have 3 instead of 2. Tells me this showed up a minute ago. So that's the report definition that was written that got moved over and made accessible to the browser tool that managers and users now have access to. All right, one more and then we'll take a break. And then we'll come back for the end of the day. We have one more feature. We call it Explore Data. These are called insights. Insights are no more than reports, but I can use them quickly for visual aids. I want to integrate them into a mashup on a website, and instead of giving me data, it's going to give me a graphic and it's going to give me a picture. And so really that's all this is for. We don't have a way right now to show an example of these, but these are many of the insights. And insights came about a year ago in the last version. People are just now starting to use them, but really, really nice tool. They take the report definitions, they quickly move them here. Now they make them available to users, people who are data analysts, who will do a lot of data analytics and need a better way to show the information. Now they use something called these Pega Insights. Pega Platform is composed of three major components. You have a portal. That portal is the browser. It's initially used by the administrator. From the administrator, then he or she will set up the developers, and then you get into your teams, and then you have your managers and your users that are set up. It is a J2EE application or servlet that runs, and it's on an application server. Any application server can support it, as long as it can support servlets and J2EE. And then you can have a configuration to a database. And as before, if you go to your virtual team server on the VTS environment, you'll see that we have created an instance of Pega that's running. And it is on this particular server, on a Tomcat server that's been installed. And our database that is running is the Postgres. You can see that. There it is. That's it. All right. And our security model, you should be well aware of that now. An operator ID can have many access groups, but because it is you can only select one. It's not a checkbox, it's a radio button. And then it has its roles that are associated with it. So the sum of all of those roles indicate then what access operator has on what's called an application rule. In an application rule, you then have up to 4 to 6 out of the box rule sets. And we talked about a rule as a logical instruction. We talk about classes as rule instances and rule sets as container of classes and rules. So when I have that application rule, then it's going to have rule sets. Rule sets have classes and rule instances, and those classes are established on layers of what we call the enterprise class structure. And we have implementation and framework, we have division, and we have org. The rules, we have 185 rule types that will allow us to create rule instances. In Pega, if it's not a rule, then Pega does not know about it. We have our API set, but when we talk about rules, it has to be known to the rules engine so that it understands what it can do. We have several categories. And if you look at the records Explore, you'll see these 15 categories that we have with all of the rule types. And the way I can exploit this, I can expand a category and it's going to show me rule types. I can click on a rule type and it's going to show me the rule instances. Another way I can view it is through the App Explorer. In the App Explorer, I now see the green leaves, which will indicate classes. So the classes will have rule types that have rule instances. Notice you don't see all 15 categories. You only see a rule type category if there is a rule instance. So here on the data model, that category has 4 rule types. So I know there's at least one rule instance of this rule type. Open property, and I now can get to the rule instance. In that rule instance, I click on it, and this is going to give me a rules form. Every rule that's created or rule instance that is created has a rule form. A rules form will always have a short description. This will print out if you print out your documentation. It will be applied to a given class. So every rule instance has an applied to class. And then it has its own unique name. So this is the ID. This is the name without spaces. It's different from the short description, which will have spaces, and then it's stored in a rule set. Now, also with a rules form will have multiple tabs, and that's what we do in Pega. In order to create a rule instance, you're going to configure a form, and it's either done automatically through the App Studio or through the Dev Studio, or it's done manually where you drop right into the rules form in Dev Studio, you find it and you go and you configure it. Now, one other thing that we have in Pega, we also have the availability. I've not talked about this before, but you have different availabilities, and I'll talk about a rules resolution process in a bit, which says that it has to be available to participate in that. If I make it unavailable, the rule may exist in my application, but it will not be chosen. There are reasons for that, but in most cases, you want all your rules to be available or for them to be one of these other types of actions that you may have as far as the availability is concerned. We have the availability to check out a rule, check in and out our rules. Remember when you set up the application, one of the responsibilities of the administrator was to make sure that you had check in and check out working, and you have something called this private edit. Now, the private edit is for rules that are already in a locked rule set and they are not available. So what that means is they're in a locked rule set, so you really can't put them back in there. So you check them out. You check them out into your private rule set, and then when you check it in, it just goes away, and you no longer have use of it. So let's take a look at that. I can go to Records Explorer. In the Records Explorer, let's go ahead and go to Data Model, and let's go to a data page. Most data pages from the system, like for instance, this is from the work system. I know that it's already in a locked rule set. It's in one of the Pega rule sets. Pega rule set is locked, and therefore, since it's locked, you'll see that it's set up as a private edit. What does private edit mean? It means it's in a locked rule set. But can I get use of it and modify it in my own personal rule set that sits at the top of the rule set stack? Absolutely. So I can do a private edit, continue with the private edit, and I can do whatever I then want to do to it. So that's what I can do with a private edit. But now, if I'm working in a team, like you guys are working in a team, you have to set it up where you have some integrity in your rules. You don't want two people working on the same rule at the same time. In Pega, there's a feature that we can set up that will make sure that that doesn't happen. But I have to know my application that I'm using. So how do I get to the application rule? Remember, the application rule is the one that has all the rule sets. And what's in rule sets? Classes and rule instances. So I can come to the Records Explorer. I can go to my application rule types. And when I click on it, it's going to give me access to all of my application rule instances. I know that I have been working in the Which one am I working in? I'm working in the tourist. Oh, here it is. I'm working in the car rental application. You see the application name here. I can click on it and open it up. And you can see that it brings me to the application rule. It is built on two applications. We've seen this before. It's built on Theme Cosmos and its CE base. And we know that Theme Cosmos is built on Pega rules. This particular application has its own rule set. It has 4 rule sets. It has an implementation rule set and it has a org rule set. So this is the, I'm sorry, yeah. So this is the implementation rule set. This is the org rule set. So this is 4 rule sets for the 2 layers. 4 rule sets for the 2 layers. You don't see a divisional layer, or you don't see that optional framework layer. So I'm building an implementation, and that comes with an org layer also. 2 rule sets per layer says what? That at the org layer, I can put certain rules here. I can also store certain rules that are integration rules only for the org layer. If I want to store my other rules in my implementation layer, I have rule sets for that. If I want to store integration rules in my rule set, I have a separate rule set for that. So the rule of thumb in Pega, if you're creating integration classes, you should separate them from all of the other rules and classes that you're using. That is the best practice. Normally, those integration rule sets, they are massive, and there's a lot of work done. They don't change as often as some of the other ones, so you want to make sure that you separate those. But we were talking about being able to check in and check out. So I can go to an open rule set. I can go to an open rule set in Pega. So I'd have to go to the application rule, look at its rule sets that creates this application, or that's created by or for this application, and I open it up. When I open it up, you see that I have rule sets here. And on the rule set, I can specify check in, check out. So that's where you go and specify check in and check out. Now, the other thing that I've done here is I've also created another version of this rule set. So I have 010101, I have 010102. I'm going to use that later on when I talk about circumstancing. You know about Pega, not Pega, but object-oriented design, we have polymorphic behavior, overloading, overriding type of behavior. We call that circumstancing in Pega. We have the capability to do that, where I have 2 versions of the same rule in different classes. That's a version of polymorphic behavior, circumstancing. Or I have 2 copies of the same rule in the same class, but in different rule set versions. That's a different spin on it. So we'll talk about that also. But in order to turn on check in and check off, check in and check out, all I have to do is click here. So that's for this rule set, the top rule set, and I do save. Now, it gives me an error because it says I really shouldn't have 2 versions unlocked at the same time. And could you imagine the chaos if I'm working in a development environment? I have 50 developers or 20 developers. I leave both of these versions open. Some people are going to put it in the O2, some's going to put it in the O1. The assumption is if it's open, then only the highest version should be open. And you guys know about versioning, right? The first number is the major number. Second number is the minor, is for feature changes or feature updates. And the third one is for fixes, for bugs, and for patches. That's what that's for. Okay. So anyway, I came here and I did a save because I'm talking about check in, check out. Now, if I go to a rule, and I open it, hold on, let's do a refresh. I now have the responsibility of checking it out before I can modify it. If I check this out, it goes into my top level rule set. And if someone else tries to check it out, it will let them know, hey, it's already checked out by someone else. But do you still want to check it out? I could set it up as an administrator. Yes, you can check it out. But the second person is checking it out as a private edit. See, that's another version of a private edit. Mostly private edit is from a locked rule set. But if you allow someone else to check it out, then that's similar to like a private edit. But in most cases, you don't want to do that. You want to set it up. If someone has it checked out, it's much like the duplicate case. It will notify the other person, hey, it's already checked out. You need to communicate with them if you really want to use it. So I then can check it out. You see the lock goes away. And then when I get through, I check it back in. And now it's checked back in, and you see that now it is locked. Now that means that this particular property has been put back in the rule set. It doesn't mean that it has locked the whole rule set. I want to make sure that you're aware of that. All right, so that talks about check in, check out. We've talked about versioning, what it means to actually version a rule. We have this concept of delegation. Delegation says what? Delegation says, how do I make a rule available in a production environment to a user? Man, why would you do that? Every other language that I've ever written in, they would never do that. They would never make a piece of Java code available to the user so they could go and modify it. But if you think about it, that's exactly what Pega is saying they can do. They can delegate a rule like a decision table. Let's say that a decision table has certain information in it for each branch. And so for each branch of a bank, I can make sure that my decision table is in a rule set that has been delegated or been given the authority for the managers or the VPs there to modify it. And so they actually have access to the rule itself, and they can go into that decision table and they can modify it. Now, what we typically do, though, we can protect some of the columns so that they can only change the results in that decision table. But we can do that in Pega. The concept of delegation is to allow a business user to change a rule. And then, of course, we want to make sure we implement all the appropriate behavior when we talk about reuse to make sure that the rule is saved in or stored at its proper location. All right, I'll stop here because this is a good point for me to stop. I'll stop. I'll pick up classes tomorrow. That's all that we have for today. Thank you for your time and your effort.